SpongeBob is one of those shows that have played a big part of my childhood. Even looking back at it now, it aged pretty well. The jokes, the animations, the music, really everything was just so perfect in the early seasons. And naturally, they expanded the show to have its own movies, video games, and more. During that era though, we got the classic Battle for Bikini Bottom game, which I just played the rehydrated version recently on the channel. We had the SpongeBob movie game and a few more SpongeBob games, mainly the ones on the Wii though, because that's the ones that I remember the most. But Purple Lamp Studios is the developers that recently remastered Battle for Bikini Bottom, so I was looking forward to the Cosmic Shake. And THQ Nordic sent me an early PlayStation copy for this game, so shout out to them for that. I really appreciate it. But regardless of that, I was planning to buy this with my own money for my PS5 when it drops. I won't lie, I went into this with the expectations of hopefully this being on par with Battle for Bikini Bottom or even better. So unfortunately, I have to say that it fell short. Before we even get into the story, the gameplay, the design of this game, or anything, let's talk about the performance. This was by far my biggest issue with this game. I made sure to check out the day one patch just to make sure I was being fair in this review, but the game still runs into these problems after the day one patch. So boom, right away I noticed some texture pop in issues, which really isn't a big deal. It does happen really in a lot of these games nowadays that come out not fully polished, but like I said, it did happen, so I have to mention it. The next thing was the long loading screens, which to me is still crazy that this is happening on a next gen console, but that wasn't the worst thing. The one thing I couldn't look past was the constant mini freezes during gameplay and even on the loading screens that took long enough as it was. The game will freeze for multiple seconds at a time on a pretty consistent basis, and it gets worse the more you progress through the game because there's more stuff on the screen in the later levels. But at the first boss fight, I had my first actual game crash on the PS5, like I said, and shortly after that I got back on and I had another game crash when I was just fighting regular enemies that time. But luckily those were the only two game crashes I had, but there was still, like I said, a lot of those mini freezes to make up for all the game crashes that almost could happen. And yeah, I heard people were having similar issues on other platforms, so it just wasn't me and my copy of the game. So that's the first red flag for this game in my opinion. The next one would be the audio. There were just so many times where multiple voice lines would overlap or even like repeat halfway through. It was super strange.
An eternity later.
Well done,
more jelly.
SpongeBob.
Ooh, that looks fun.
If Squid Note plays again this
Why
year,
can't even listen to me?
almost time for the audition.
I hope that old
I
witch
got
wasn't
my
invited this time. She's always such a fruit.
And on top of that, there are moments where there would be sound effects missing or even music. Overall, I would say that this game definitely needed a 3 to 6 month delay to be more complete for the launch of it, because right now it's not it. But besides all of the technical issues, I feel like this is an okay game for the most part. You have an original storyline where SpongeBob makes a mistake and has to save Bikini Bottom. He travels to 7 different realities to fix this problem, which are basically just environments based on the SpongeBob universe. And each environment has their own unique theme to match whatever character you're trying to save. And with the 7 different levels, you unfortunately can't pick which one you want to go explore first. And this means the game takes a linear approach this time around. The main story by itself is about 6 to 7 hours long, and if you want to do side quests, that'll add maybe a few more hours onto your playtime. But the level design is solid for the most part, especially with some of the later levels. I enjoyed it. The only downside I can say is that you cannot go into the inside of every building like you could back in Battle for Bikini Bottom. What you see is pretty much what you get in these levels. And as for the collectibles, I feel like they aren't as important as they were previously. The only purpose they serve here is to unlock cosmetic outfits, which they have great designs, but it just kind of feels pointless since the outfits you select don't show up in the cutscenes. It only forces the outfit it wants you to have in that world in that cutscene. and it also doesn't carry over the outfits that you manually unlocked when you start a new game. You can replay the boss fights, but that's really about it. The golden spatulas though, in the old game, they let you choose what part of the world you wanted to unlock and explore. They had a cool animation and sound effects when you would find them. And in Cosmic Shake, it really just lacks that soul and charm that these old games had. But another example I can give that, you know, perfectly shows this is they bring back the tongue sliding sections from the Battle for Bikini Bottom, but they don't change the music when you enter the section. So just like how they had the dan in the old, they don't have that. It's either the same music or it's just completely silent for some reason. So just stuff like that is stuff that I noticed, but the gameplay is what really saves this game. It isn't the greatest thing ever, but there is a lot of fun to be had with all of SpongeBob's new abilities. The karate kick is definitely my favorite one just because of how much you can close the gap against enemies. It kind of reminds me of why I like Lee Sin so much, but that's besides the point. Chaining all these abilities together when you're platforming is super satisfying, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of the game. But instead, this game focuses a lot on combat. And you know, while there's a good variety of enemies, most of them can be kind of tedious to deal with. The enemies have more health, and certain ones kind of require you to let them attack you first and then you can fight back. It isn't challenging, but it just slows the momentum down when they force these fighting sections, which doesn't make sense because fighting you would think it would be fast paced, but in this game it's kind of annoying. Speaking of a challenge though, it shouldn't be that difficult for kids to follow along with this game. Your main objective is pretty much always on the screen, and there are constant tutorials that pop up showing you what to do. As a kid, it makes perfect sense for this to be how it is. Even the few puzzles that are in this game, they are pretty straightforward, so you don't have to worry about a kid getting really stuck on it. Like how old kids game used to be. They used to be ruthless in those old kids games, but I just wish that there were more boss fights. The creativity in that Robo Sandy fight from Battle for Bikini Bottom is something that I wanted to see kind of replicated in Cosmic Shake. And I know Purple Lamp is a relatively new studio, so I hope their future titles can get a higher budget and they're allowed more time to work on the game. And I really would like to see the multiple character dynamic that Battle for Bikini Bottom had be an inspiration for the future if they keep doing these SpongeBob games. But all in all, I would say that obviously I found some fun in the Cosmic Shake. They definitely need to iron out the technical issues and even some of the glitches that I came across. They'll most likely improve the performance for this game soon, maybe. Until then, I say wait a few months before you pick this up. But if you or a kid you know hasn't played Battle for Bikini Bottom, I keep saying it in this video for a reason. It's a $30 game, so $10 cheaper than this game. If you haven't played that, definitely give it a go. But this one is alright once they fix it up. Hopefully this review helped you out. If it did, make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, man. Peace.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?